When Corporal Jake Davis shoved the small woman in the cafeteria and told her to get out of the way, he had no idea he had just physically assaulted the most lethal sniper in United States military history. By the time he realized his mistake, his career, his ego, and his understanding of what it meant to be a warrior would be forever changed. Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, Tuesday, 11:45 hours. The SEAL team cafeteria was packed with operators fresh from morning training evolutions. Dozens of physically imposing men, all of them among the most elite warriors in the world, filled the space with the loud energy that came from intense physical exertion and the camaraderie of shared hardship. They wore a mix of training uniforms, some still damp with sweat and salt water from ocean training, others in standard fatigues. The noise level was high, conversations overlapping, the clatter of trays and silverware providing a constant background rhythm. Corporal Jake Davis, 24 years old with 18 months as a SEAL under his belt, stood in the food line with 3 of his teammates. He was riding high on confidence from a successful training evolution that morning, where his boat crew had placed first in a competitive exercise. He felt invincible, felt like he had finally arrived as a true operator. That feeling was about to be violently corrected. A woman entered the cafeteria carrying a small notebook. She was maybe 5'4", slender build, wearing plain fatigues with no visible rank insignia, no unit patches, no identification of any kind. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked to be in her late 30s, possibly early 40s. She moved to the food line and took a position, waiting her turn like anyone else. Davis noticed her immediately and made an instant assessment. Small woman in plain clothes. Probably a civilian contractor, maybe admin staff. Definitely not a SEAL, obviously not an operator of any kind. He turned to his teammates. "What's a civilian doing in our cafeteria? This is supposed to be restricted to team personnel." His friend, another corporal named Rodriguez, shrugged. "Probably someone's wife who got lost looking for the visitor center." They laughed. The woman reached the serving line and began selecting food items. She moved efficiently, no wasted motion, her attention focused on the task. Davis and his crew reached the serving area right behind her. Davis was impatient, still pumped with adrenaline from the morning's competition, wanting to get food and get back to his team's table to celebrate their win. The woman was moving too slowly for his taste. Without thinking, operating purely on ego and assumption, Davis reached out and shoved her aside. Not hard enough to really hurt her in his mind, just enough to move her out of his way. "Move it, civilian. You're holding up the line." The woman stumbled from the unexpected contact, her tray tilting. Food slid off and scattered across the floor. She caught herself against the counter but went down to one knee, her notebook falling open beside her. Several SEALs nearby saw what happened. Some laughed. Others looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Davis barely noticed her on the ground. He grabbed a tray and started loading food. Rodriguez bent down mockingly toward the woman. "You okay down there, ma'am? Maybe the SEAL cafeteria isn't the best place for you. Visitor center is that way." He pointed toward the exit, and more SEALs laughed. The woman didn't respond. She calmly gathered the spilled food, closed her notebook, and stood up. Her expression was completely neutral. No anger, no embarrassment, no reaction at all. She simply stepped back from the line and moved to the side, watching. Davis took his full tray and walked toward his team's table, already forgetting about the incident. That's when the atmosphere in the cafeteria changed. The double doors at the far end burst open and Master Chief Petty Officer Samuel "Sam" Curtis strode in. He was a legend at Coronado, with 28 years as a SEAL, multiple combat deployments, and more classified operations than anyone could count. Curtis scanned the cafeteria with the practiced eye of someone who missed nothing. His gaze swept across the room, cataloging personnel, assessing situations. His eyes landed on the woman standing to the side of the food line, brushing off her uniform. Curtis's face went from its normal stern expression to something between shock and absolute horror. He stopped walking. His mouth opened slightly. For a moment, the legendary Master Chief looked like he might faint. Then he moved. Curtis crossed the cafeteria at a near run, weaving between tables with an urgency that immediately captured everyone's attention. Conversations stopped. SEALs turned to watch their Master Chief moving with obvious distress. He reached the woman, and his voice, when he spoke, carried across the now silent cafeteria. "Reaper 6 is on the ground." The effect was immediate and total. Every SEAL in the cafeteria who understood that call sign froze. Trays stopped moving. Conversations died mid-word. The entire space went from loud and energetic to absolutely silent in less than 2 seconds. Davis, halfway to his table, stopped walking. He didn't understand the call sign, didn't know what Reaper 6 meant, but he understood the tone in Master Chief Curtis's voice. Something was very, very wrong. Curtis reached the woman and came to attention, rendering a salute that was crisp and respectful. "Ma'am, are you injured? Do you need medical attention?" The woman returned the salute calmly. "I'm fine, Master Chief, just a minor incident." Curtis turned slowly to look at the cafeteria, his expression showing barely controlled fury. Who put Reaper 6 on the ground? Who touched her? The silence deepened. No one moved. No one spoke. Davis felt his stomach drop. He still didn't fully understand what was happening, but he was beginning to realize that the woman he had shoved might be someone important. Very important. Curtis's eyes swept the room, reading guilt and fear in body language. His gaze settled on Davis, who was standing frozen with his tray, looking pale. Corporal Davis. Was it you? Davis wanted to lie, wanted to run, wanted to disappear, but lying to Master Chief Curtis was unthinkable. "Yes, Master Chief. I didn't know." "You didn't know," Curtis repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "You didn't know who she was, so you thought it was acceptable to physically shove her out of your way?" "Master Chief, I thought she was a civilian. She was in the SEAL cafeteria, and You just assumed," Curtis finished. "You saw someone who didn't look like a SEAL, didn't look like an operator, and you decided she didn't belong here, so you shoved her." "Yes, Master Chief." Curtis looked at the other SEALs who had laughed. "And the rest of you thought it was funny, thought it was appropriate to mock someone you assumed was lost or out of place." No one responded. Curtis turned back to the woman, his expression transforming from fury to profound respect. "Ma'am, I apologize on behalf of this entire command. This behavior is unacceptable and does not represent the standards we claim to uphold." The woman, Reaper 6, looked at Curtis with calm eyes. "Master Chief, there's no need to apologize. This is exactly what I came here to observe. Ma'am, I was asked to evaluate the SEAL sniper training program, but before I assess tactical skills, I wanted to assess something more fundamental: culture, respect, how this community treats people who don't obviously belong to their tribe." She looked around the silent cafeteria. "In the past 10 minutes, I've learned everything I need to know about that." Curtis looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole. The woman picked up her notebook from where it had fallen, brushed it off, and walked to the center of the cafeteria so everyone could see her clearly. "For those who don't know me, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Hayes. My operational call sign is Reaper 6. I command the Joint Special Operations Command Precision Shooter program. I've been operating in that capacity for 15 years. She paused, letting that information settle. "In those 15 years, I've conducted operations in 17 countries. I have over 200 confirmed kills as a precision shooter. I've trained more than half the sniper instructors currently teaching in U.S. Special Operations. And I've never, not once, failed a mission or lost a student in combat." The SEALs stood in absolute silence, many of them now understanding exactly who they were looking at. Reaper 6 was a legend in the Special Operations community, a ghost. Most people thought the call sign was attached to a male operator. Many thought it was a myth, an amalgamation of multiple snipers rather than one person. But here she stood, a small woman in plain fatigues who had just been shoved to the ground in their cafeteria. "I came here," Hayes continued, to evaluate whether your sniper program meets JSOC standards, whether your shooters have the skills and discipline required for the operations we conduct. She looked directly at Davis. But before I assess shooting skills, I need to assess something more important: character, judgment, the ability to operate without bias or assumption. Because in my world, assumptions get people killed. She walked slowly through the cafeteria, making eye contact with various SEALs. The enemy doesn't always look like what you expect. The asset you need to protect might not look like a warrior. The person who can save your life might be someone you would have dismissed as irrelevant. She stopped in front of Davis. You saw someone who didn't fit your mental image of what belongs in a SEAL cafeteria, so you physically removed that person without verifying who they were or why they were present. Davis couldn't meet her eyes. In a combat zone, that assumption would have gotten you killed, or worse, gotten your teammates killed. She turned to address the entire room again. I'm going to be on this base for the next 60 days evaluating your sniper program. During that time, Corporal Davis will be my personal assistant. He will carry my equipment, set up my range targets, and observe every training evolution I conduct. Curtis looked surprised, but nodded approval. He will learn what it means to operate with precision, discipline, and respect. And at the end of 60 days, we'll assess whether he's learned anything or whether he should find a different career path. Davis felt his world collapsing. 60 days as a personal assistant to someone he had just assaulted. 60 days of humiliation in front of his peers. His career was over. But Hayes wasn't done. She looked around at all the SEALs who had laughed or said nothing when she was shoved. The rest of you will also be learning a lesson about assumptions, about respect, and about what it actually means to be elite. Elite isn't just about physical capability or tactical skills. Elite is about character. She closed her notebook. Training resumes tomorrow at 0600. Corporal Davis, report to Master Chief Curtis at 0530 for your new assignment. Everyone else, I suggest you spend tonight thinking carefully about what happened here and what it reveals about this command's culture. She turned and walked out of the cafeteria, leaving behind a room full of SEALs processing what had just happened. After she left, Curtis addressed the stunned room. Let me make something absolutely clear. What Corporal Davis did represents the kind of thinking that gets people killed in the field. He made assumptions based on appearance. He used physical force without verifying the situation. He treated someone as less than human because they didn't fit his expectations. He looked at each table. All of you are guilty to varying degrees. Some of you laughed. Some of you said nothing. None of you questioned what was happening or stood up for someone being disrespected. He paused. REAPER 6 is here because JSOC requested an independent evaluation of our sniper program. She has the authority to recommend anything from minor adjustments to complete program shutdown. And her first impression is that we shoved her to the ground in our own cafeteria. The weight of that settled over the room. Curtis dismissed them, and the SEALs filed out in silence. Their earlier energy and confidence completely evaporated. Davis stood alone, his food tray forgotten, processing the catastrophic mistake he had just made. He had physically assaulted a lieutenant colonel, had shoved one of the most lethal operators in U.S. military history, had done it in front of witnesses while operating on nothing but ego and assumption. His career was over. He was certain of it. But what he didn't yet understand was that REAPER 6 had given him something much more valuable than a destroyed career. She'd given him a chance to learn a lesson that would either make him or break him, and the next 60 days would determine which it would be. Corporal Jake Davis stood outside Master Chief Curtis's office at 5:30 the next morning, his dress uniform immaculate, his mind racing with dread about what the next 60 days would bring. The door opened and Curtis gestured him inside. "Sit down, Davis." Davis sat at attention, unable to relax. Curtis pulled out a classified folder stamped with multiple security warnings and clearance requirements. Before you begin working with REAPER 6, you need to understand who she is. Not the legend, not the rumors, but the actual operational history. He opened the folder. "What I'm about to tell you is classified. You will not discuss it outside of authorized channels. Understood?" "Yes, Master Chief." Curtis pulled out a series of photographs and mission summaries. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Hayes, age 42. She enlisted in the Army at 18 as an infantryman, before women were officially allowed in combat roles. She lied about her gender on initial paperwork and served 6 months in a combat zone before being discovered and discharged. Davis looked surprised. Instead of giving up, she joined the Marine Corps under her real identity and became a marksmanship instructor. She was so exceptional that she was recruited by a classified program developing female snipers for unconventional warfare operations. Curtis laid out more documents. At age 26, she conducted her first combat sniper mission in Afghanistan. High-value target elimination at 1/800 meters. Perfect shot. The target had been evading capture for 3 years. She eliminated him and extracted without anyone knowing she had been there. He showed another photo. That was her first confirmed kill. Over the next 15 years, she conducted operations in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, Libya, and 11 other countries I can't name. She accumulated over 200 confirmed kills. Not probable, not possible. Confirmed with photo or video evidence. Davis tried to process this information. 200 kills was nearly impossible. The most famous snipers in history had numbers far lower. Her longest confirmed kill, Curtis continued, was 2,475 meters. That's over 1.5 miles. She made that shot in Syria in 2019, eliminating an ISIS commander who was about to execute 3 captured American contractors. He showed a mission report marked with the highest classification levels. She's not just a shooter, she's an instructor who has trained over 300 precision shooters across all branches of special operations. Students trained by REAPER 6 have a 98% mission success rate and a 0% mortality rate in combat operations. Curtis looked at Davis directly. "The woman you shoved yesterday has personally saved at least 47 American lives through direct action. She's prevented terrorist attacks that would have killed thousands. And she's done it all while operating in a community that constantly questioned whether women belonged in combat roles." He closed the folder. JSOC created a special position for her because she was too valuable to fit into normal command structures. She reports directly to the JSOC commander and has authority that exceeds most generals. When REAPER 6 evaluates a program, her recommendations become orders. Davis felt smaller with every word. "The reason I'm telling you this," Curtis said, "is so you understand the magnitude of your error. You didn't just shove a woman in a cafeteria. You physically assaulted one of the most accomplished and respected operators in U.S. military history. Master Chief, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything, listen. REAPER 6 could have ended your career with one word, could have filed assault charges that would have put you in prison, could have had you dishonorably discharged. Why didn't she?" "Because," Curtis said, "she believes in teaching rather than destroying. She's done this before with other young operators who made similar mistakes. Some of them are now among the best snipers in the military." He stood. "You're going to spend 60 days learning from the best. If you're smart, you'll pay attention. If you're not, you'll waste an opportunity that most operators would kill for." "Yes, Master Chief. She's waiting at Range 7. Don't be late." Davis drove to the remote training range on the north side of the base. Range 7 was used for long-distance precision shooting, with target positions extending out to 2,000 meters across varied terrain. When he arrived, REAPER 6 was already there, setting up equipment. She wore simple fatigues and a baseball cap, looking like any other shooter preparing for a training evolution. "Corporal Davis reporting as ordered, ma'am." She looked up from the rifle she was assembling. "Good. You're on time. Grab that spotting scope and set it up on the firing line." Davis did as instructed, handling the expensive equipment carefully. For the next hour, Hayes methodically prepared for a shooting demonstration. Davis watched as she checked wind conditions, calculated range adjustments, and positioned targets at various distances. Her movements were efficient, practiced, without wasted motion. Everything she did had purpose. Finally, she settled into a prone position behind a rifle that Davis recognized as a highly customized B-138 Lapua Magnum. Corporal looked through the spotting scope, target at 1,200 meters, center mass of the silhouette. Davis found the target, barely visible in the distance. "I see it, ma'am. Wind is 3 to 5 miles per hour left to right. Temperature is 68 degrees. Humidity is 40%. Based on those conditions, what's your adjustment calculation?" Davis tried to remember his training, calculating in his head. "Approximately 4.2 mils left, ma'am?" Hayes didn't respond. She simply adjusted her scope, controlled her breathing, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked. Through the spotting scope, Davis saw the target's center mass explode. "Perfect hit. Your calculation was wrong," Hayes said calmly. "You would have missed by 8 inches. In a combat situation, that's the difference between eliminating a threat and alerting them to your position." She moved to a different position. Next target. 1,800 meters. Headshot on the silhouette. Davis found the target, which was incredibly small at that distance. Hayes went through her process again, checking conditions, calculating adjustments, controlling breathing. Another shot, another perfect hit. For 3 hours, Hayes demonstrated shot after shot at distances ranging from 800 to 2,200 meters. Every single shot was perfect. Center mass hits, headshots, moving targets, targets partially obscured by cover. She never missed. Davis watched with growing awe and humiliation. He had shoved this woman, had dismissed her as irrelevant, while she possessed skills he couldn't even comprehend. After the demonstration, Hayes packed up her rifle with the same methodical efficiency. "What did you observe, Corporal?" Davis struggled to articulate it. "Ma'am, I observed precision and skill beyond anything I've seen before. Every shot was perfect. Why were they perfect? Because you calculated everything exactly. You didn't rush. You controlled every variable." Hayes nodded. "Precision shooting isn't about physical strength or aggression. It's about patience, calculation, and the discipline to wait for the perfect moment. The best snipers aren't the ones who can shoot the fastest. They're the ones who can wait the longest." She looked at him directly. "Yesterday in the cafeteria, you operated on impulse and assumption. You saw someone in your way and you removed them without thinking, without calculating consequences, without patience or discipline." Davis nodded, ashamed. "That approach might work in some situations," Hayes continued, "but in precision operations, it gets people killed. You can't assume. You can't rush. You have to see clearly, calculate accurately, and act decisively only when you're certain." She handed him a notebook. "For the next 60 days, you're going to learn those skills, not just in shooting, but in thinking, in observing, in questioning your own assumptions before they become actions." "Yes, ma'am." The next several weeks fell into a pattern. Davis reported at 5:30 every morning. He carried Hayes' equipment, set up ranges, maintained weapons, and observed her work. But more importantly, he listened. Hayes taught constantly, not just about shooting, but about leadership, respect, discipline, and the mental framework required for precision operations. On day 12, after a particularly challenging shooting evolution, Hayes spoke to Davis about assumption. "Tell me what you assumed about me when you saw me in the cafeteria." Davis hesitated, then decided honesty was the only option. "I assumed you were a civilian, ma'am, someone who didn't belong there. I saw a small woman in plain clothes and decided she wasn't important." "Why did you make that assumption?" Because you didn't look like a SEAL. You didn't fit my mental image of what an operator looks like." "And what does an operator look like, Corporal?" Davis thought carefully. "I guess I thought operators had to be big, physically imposing, obviously dangerous." Hayes smiled slightly. That's exactly the assumption that makes me effective. Enemy combatants see a small woman and they don't perceive threat. They don't take defensive positions. They don't heighten security. And that moment of underestimation is when I take the shot. She packed up her rifle. The most dangerous people rarely look dangerous, Corporal. That's true in combat, and it's true in life. The moment you judge capability by appearance is the moment you become vulnerable. On day 30, halfway through his assignment, Hayes took Davis to observe a training class she was teaching to SEAL sniper candidates. 20 SEALs, all of them experienced operators, sat in a classroom while Hayes taught advanced ballistics and environmental calculation. Davis watched as she commanded absolute respect. These SEALs who had laughed when he shoved her in the cafeteria now hung on her every word, taking detailed notes, asking technical questions that revealed deep respect for her expertise. After the class, one of the students approached Hayes. "Ma'am, I wanted to apologize. I was in the cafeteria that day when Corporal Davis, when the incident happened. I didn't intervene, and I should have." Hayes looked at him. "Why didn't you?" "Because I didn't know who you were, ma'am. I saw the situation, but I assumed it wasn't my business. So you only would have intervened if you knew I was important." The SEAL looked uncomfortable. I guess so, ma'am." "That's the problem," Hayes said. "Respect and intervention shouldn't depend on someone's rank or status. If you see someone being disrespected or assaulted, you intervene because it's wrong, not because the victim is important." The SEAL nodded, understanding. Davis watched this interaction and realized Hayes was teaching the same lesson to everyone, not just to him. The entire command was learning to question their assumptions and biases. On day 45, Hayes took Davis to a classified briefing about an upcoming operation. She had been requested to provide sniper support for a hostage rescue in an unnamed country. Davis sat in the operations center, cleared to hear the briefing because of his assignment to Hayes. The mission planning was incredibly complex. Multiple enemy combatants, civilian hostages, difficult terrain, tight time window. Hayes asked pointed questions about every detail, lines of sight, target identification protocols, backup plans if primary position was compromised. Davis recognized the same precision and discipline he had observed in her shooting. She calculated every variable, questioned every assumption, refused to accept a plan until she was absolutely certain it would work. At the end of the briefing, the mission commander turned to Hayes. "Reaper 6, can you make this shot?" Hayes studied the targeting information for a long moment. "Yes, but only if the target presents himself exactly where intelligence predicts. If he deviates by more than 2 meters, the shot becomes impossible from the designated position." "What's your confidence level?" 95% on the shot itself, 70% that the target will position himself correctly. Overall mission success probability, 67%. The commander looked concerned. "Those aren't great odds." "No," Hayes agreed, "but they're the best odds you'll get with the constraints we have. If you want better probability, we need to change the mission parameters or wait for a better opportunity." The commander consulted with his staff, then nodded. "We'll proceed. You're authorized for the operation." After they left the briefing, Davis spoke up. "Ma'am, you told them the odds weren't great. Most operators would have just said yes and taken the mission." "Most operators would be wrong," Hayes said. "My job isn't to tell commanders what they want to hear. My job is to give them accurate assessments so they can make informed decisions." She looked at him. "That's another lesson, Corporal. Honesty and precision in communication are as important as precision in shooting. Lives depend on accurate information." On day 58, 2 days before Davis's assignment would end, Hayes conducted his final evaluation. They stood at the range at dawn, the sun just breaking over the horizon. "Corporal Davis," Hayes said formally, "you've completed 58 days working under my supervision. Today I'm going to assess whether you've learned anything." "Yes, ma'am." She handed him a rifle. "Target at 1,000 meters. Wind is 4 miles per hour, right to left. Make the shot." Davis settled into position, went through all the procedures Hayes had taught him, calculated his adjustments, and took the shot. Through the spotting scope, Hayes observed. Hit. 3 inches left of center mass. Not perfect, but significantly better than Davis could have done 60 days ago. Hayes nodded. Acceptable. Now tell me what you learned in the past 60 days. Not about shooting, about everything else. Davis thought carefully about his answer. I learned that assumptions are tactical vulnerabilities, ma'am. That capability can't be judged by appearance. That respect should be universal, not dependent on rank or status. That precision in thinking is as important as precision in action. He paused, and I learned that I was arrogant, ignorant, and dangerous. That the qualities I thought made me elite, aggression and confidence, were actually weaknesses that would have gotten people killed. Hayes studied him for a long moment. Good. You've learned the basic lessons. Now you need to spend the rest of your career applying them and teaching them to others. She handed him a folder. This is your evaluation. It's positive. I'm recommending you for advanced sniper training and eventual instructor qualification. But that recommendation comes with a requirement. What requirement, ma'am? That you become an advocate for changing the culture that allowed you to think it was acceptable to shove someone in a cafeteria, that you teach other young SEALs what you learned, that you make sure the next generation doesn't make the same mistakes. Davis took the folder, feeling the weight of that responsibility. I will, ma'am, I promise. Hayes extended her hand and Davis shook it. Good. Then my work here is done. Your assignment ends in 2 days. After that, you report back to your team. Use what you learned. Davis returned to his unit a different operator than he had been 60 days earlier. The SEAL who had shoved Reaper 6 in the cafeteria was gone. In his place was someone who finally understood what it meant to be truly elite. 2 days after completing his assignment with Reaper 6, Corporal Davis was called to an urgent mission brief. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes entered with JSOC operations officers. 72 hours ago, a CIA asset in Syria was compromised. He's being held in this compound outside Raqqa by an ISIS cell. Execution scheduled in 36 hours. Hayes pulled up satellite imagery. Conventional assault risks asset execution. We need precision elimination of 3 targets simultaneously. The cell commander, interrogator, and senior guard. I'll take the hardest shot at 1,047 meters. Corporal Davis takes the guard at 1,200 meters. The room went silent. Davis felt his stomach drop. Ma'am, I've only trained 60 days. I'm not qualified for live combat targeting. You're more qualified than you think. I've assessed your capabilities. You can make this shot. The team leader, Lieutenant Morrison, looked skeptical. Ma'am, putting an inexperienced shooter on a critical mission seems risky. I'm confident in his abilities. The question is whether he's confident. All eyes turned to Davis. He thought about 60 days of training, hundreds of shots observed, lessons learned. I can make the shot, ma'am. For the next 30 hours, Hayes drilled him relentlessly. Range sessions simulating exact conditions, mental preparation, stress management. By deployment time, Davis had rehearsed the shot 100 times. They flew into Syria at sunset, inserted by helicopter 10 kilometers from target. Hayes led them through hostile terrain to shooting positions. Davis established position behind rocks with clear view of the compound. Through his scope at 1,247 meters, he saw his target. The senior guard sitting beside the door holding the asset. Hayes's voice crackled through his radio. All shooters, target confirmation in 30 seconds. Davis controlled his breathing, heart rate slowing as trained. Countdown begins. 3, 2, 1. Mark. 60 seconds. Davis focused on breathing technique. 45 seconds. Finger on trigger. 30 seconds. Wind calculation verified. 15 seconds. Heartbeat steady. 10 seconds. Perfect sight picture. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Execute. Davis squeezed. The rifle kicked. Through his scope, the guard's head snapped back. All targets down, Hayes reported. Assault team, proceed. SEALs breached the compound, extracted the asset in 90 seconds. 12 minutes later, helicopters extracted everyone safely. Hayes sat beside Davis on the flight back. Clean kill, perfect placement. You proved everything you learned wasn't just theory. You applied it under real pressure with real consequences. Back at base, Master Chief Curtis found Davis. Perfect shot. You're being assigned to sniper school as assistant instructor. You'll teach what you learned. Davis looked surprised. I just made my first combat shot yesterday. That makes you perfect for teaching. You remember the fear, the doubt. You can help students overcome those obstacles. Hayes approached with a small case containing a precision shooting instructor badge. You've earned this through 60 days of dedication and transformation. It represents responsibility, not achievement. Ma'am, 2 months ago, I was arrogant and dangerous. You could have destroyed me. Why teach instead? Because I've been underestimated my entire career. I chose to teach rather than punish. Remember that when you encounter young operators who make mistakes, always choose development over destruction. I will, ma'am. I promise. They shook hands, both understanding this was goodbye. She would return to classified missions. He would begin teaching the next generation. The corporal who shoved Reaper 6 was gone forever. 3 years after the Syria mission, Staff Sergeant Jake Davis stood in front of a classroom of SEAL sniper candidates at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. He wore his instructor uniform with the precision shooting badge prominently displayed, along with ribbons from multiple combat deployments. But the most significant item he wore was a small patch on his right shoulder. Custom made, not officially authorized, but tolerated by command because of what it represented. The patch showed a crosshair with the words, "Taught by Reaper 6. "Good morning," Davis said to the 12 candidates seated before him. "I'm Staff Sergeant Davis, and before we begin technical instruction, I'm going to tell you a story about the biggest mistake I ever made and the lesson that saved my career." The candidates settled in, curious. 5 years ago, I was a corporal, fresh off a successful training evolution, feeling invincible. I walked into the SEAL cafeteria and saw a small woman in plain fatigues holding up the food line. Without thinking, without verifying who she was, I shoved her out of my way. She fell. Her tray scattered across the floor. He paused, letting that sink in. That woman was Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Hayes, Reaper 6, the most accomplished precision shooter in U.S. military history, over 200 confirmed kills, and I had just physically assaulted her because I assumed she didn't belong in a SEAL cafeteria. Some of the candidates shifted uncomfortably. She could have ended my career instantly. Instead, she gave me 60 days working as her assistant. 60 days of learning precision shooting, yes, but more importantly, 60 days of learning humility, respect, and how to question my own assumptions. Davis walked among the candidates. That lesson saved my life 14 months later in Syria when I made a combat shot that extracted a CIA asset. It saved my career when I became an instructor. And it's the foundation of everything I'm going to teach you over the next 12 weeks. A candidate raised his hand. Staff Sergeant. Is it true that Reaper 6 has over 200 confirmed kills? That's classified information, but yes, that number is accurate. She's also trained over 400 precision shooters. If you're being taught by me, you're learning methods that came directly from her. Over the 12-week course, Davis implemented every teaching method Hayes had shown him. He emphasized mental discipline over physical capability. He taught students to question assumptions and calculate precisely. He created scenarios that challenged their biases and forced them to see beyond surface appearances. 8 of the 12 candidates completed the course successfully. All 8 credited Davis's teaching style with helping them develop not just as shooters, but as complete operators. 1 year later, Davis received orders to report to Fort Bragg for a special assignment. When he arrived, he was escorted to a secure facility and found Lieutenant Colonel Hayes waiting in civilian clothes. "Staff Sergeant Davis," she said with a smile. "It's good to see you. I requested you specifically for this assignment." Hayes pulled up a presentation showing data from the past 3 years. Since you began teaching at the sniper school, your students have achieved a 96% mission success rate in combat operations. That's the highest rate of any instructor in the program. More importantly, your students consistently demonstrate better judgment and decision-making than shooters trained by other instructors. She looked at him directly. You're not just teaching shooting. You're teaching the complete mental framework that makes elite operators truly elite. The Department of Defense is creating a new training program for cross-service precision shooter development. I've been asked to design the curriculum, and I want you to be the lead instructor. Davis was stunned. Ma'am, that's an enormous responsibility. I'm just a staff sergeant. You're an operator who understands that rank doesn't determine capability, who treats every person with respect, who questions assumptions and teaches precision in thinking. Those qualities make you perfect for this role. Davis thought about the opportunity to spread the lessons that had transformed him. I accept, ma'am. Thank you for this opportunity. Over the next year, Davis worked alongside Hayes to create the Joint Special Operations Precision Shooter program. They developed curriculum, trained instructors, and began pilot courses with students from all special operations branches. The program emphasized not just technical shooting skills, but the complete mental framework Hayes had pioneered: precision thinking, assumption questioning, universal respect, mental discipline under pressure. The results exceeded expectations. Graduates showed significantly higher mission success rates and better decision-making than operators trained through conventional methods. 2 years into the program, Davis received a promotion to gunnery sergeant and was given full command of the training facility. On the day of his promotion ceremony, Hayes attended as guest speaker. 10 years ago, a young corporal made a mistake that could have ended his career. He made assumptions based on appearance. He acted on impulse rather than calculation. But that corporal was willing to learn, willing to admit his mistakes, willing to transform himself. She looked at Davis. Today, Gunnery Sergeant Davis commands a training program that's transforming how we develop precision shooters across all special operations forces. His students are operating in combat zones worldwide, applying the lessons he teaches, saving lives through precise action and clear thinking. After the ceremony, Davis and Hayes spoke privately. Ma'am, I wanted to thank you again for not destroying me when you could have, for teaching me, for giving me opportunities I didn't deserve. Hayes shook her head. You earned those opportunities through your own work. I just provided the initial lesson. Training one person who goes on to train hundreds is more valuable than any single operation I could have conducted. That's the real force multiplier. She looked at the training facility around them. This program, these instructors, the thousands of operators who will be trained here over the next decades, this is my real legacy. Not the missions I conducted, but the culture of precision and respect that will outlive both of us. 3 years later, Gunnery Sergeant Davis received an email from a Marine raider he didn't know. Gunny Davis, I went through your program last year. Yesterday in Afghanistan, I encountered a local woman who I initially dismissed as irrelevant to our operation. Then I remembered your lessons about assumptions. Turned out she was a key intelligence asset who provided information that prevented an ambush. Your training saved my team's lives. Thank you. Davis saved the email in a folder of similar messages. Over the years, he'd received dozens. Operators whose lives had been saved, missions that had succeeded, catastrophes prevented, all because they remembered the lessons about questioning assumptions and respecting every person. 5 years after the cafeteria incident, Davis was promoted to Master Sergeant and given responsibility for all Special Operations Sniper, training across the Department of Defense. On his first day in the new position, he had a custom plaque made for his office wall. The most dangerous people rarely look dangerous. The most capable warriors don't need to prove themselves. True elite status comes from precision in thinking, humility in action, and respect for every person regardless of rank or appearance. Inspired by Lada Call Sarah Hayes, Reaper 6. Below the message was a photo of Hayes in that SEAL cafeteria 10 years ago, holding a tray, being invisible to everyone who passed by. The photo captured perfectly the lesson that had transformed Davis's life. 20 years after the cafeteria incident, retired Master Gunnery Sergeant Davis stood at a memorial service for Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Hayes, who had passed away at age 62. Hundreds of special operations personnel attended. Davis was asked to speak, representing the thousands of operators Hayes had trained directly or indirectly. 23 years ago, I was an arrogant young corporal who shoved a woman in a cafeteria because I assumed she didn't belong there. That woman was Sarah Hayes, Reaper 6, and that moment changed my life. He gestured to the crowd. Look around this room. How many of you were trained by Reaper 6 directly? Dozens of hands went up. How many were trained by instructors she taught? Hundreds more. How many have applied her lessons about precision, respect, and questioning assumptions in your operations? Nearly every hand in the room went up. That's her legacy, not just the missions she conducted or the targets she eliminated, but the culture she built, the thousands of operators who learned that true elite status comes from precision in thinking, humility in action, and respect for every person. Davis pulled out the photo from his office showing Hayes holding a tray. This photo reminds me every day of the most important lesson in my career, that the person you underestimate might be the most capable person you ever meet, that assumptions are deadly, that respect should be universal. The memorial concluded and Davis returned to his office at the Reaper 6 Center for Precision Operations. On his desk was a final letter Hayes had written before her death. Jake, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. But I wanted you to know how proud I am of what you've become. That arrogant corporal transformed into one of the finest instructors I've ever known. You took the lessons I taught and amplified them thousandfold. The program you built will train operators for generations. Keep teaching. Keep transforming arrogant young operators into humble, precise warriors. That's how we honor those who taught us. Sarah. Davis folded the letter carefully and placed it in his desk drawer. Tomorrow he would begin training a new class of sniper candidates. Young operators who would learn the same lessons that had transformed him. Lessons about precision, humility, respect, and questioning assumptions. Lessons that came from a woman who spent her career being underestimated and used that underestimation as her greatest tactical advantage. The legacy of Reaper 6 would live on, not in classified mission reports or combat medals, but in every operator who learned to question their assumptions, respect every person, and understand that true elite status comes not from how dangerous you look, but from how precisely you think and act. That was the real victory. That was the true legacy. And it all started with a shove in a cafeteria and a choice to teach rather than destroy.